Okay, in this tutorial, we're going to start to look more deeply into what you can do with flow screens. And we're really going to focus on choices, which are used in radio buttons and pick lists. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this very simple flow. We're going to put up a screen that collects data, and we're going to use that data to update a record. So we're going to run this from a contact page. So we're going to basically load the flow here into part of the contact page layout, the contact record page. We're going to gather the information in this combination of pick lists and radio buttons, and then once that information is entered, we're going to use it to update some fields on the contact. So here are some of the results of updating those fields. So why might you do this? What's a use case for this? Well, someone might be on the phone taking information from this customer who has called in, and they need an easy way to fill out the information and update the contact. Now, as part of the preparation for this, I have added a pick list field to the contact, and that pick list field, we can go take a look at it. It's just a regular pick list field, and it's called area of expertise, and you can see that this pick list field has these 5 different Salesforce values, these different areas of expertise, and so we're going to make use of that. We're going to drag our screen element out, and we're going to call this screen collect data, and we're going to place our screen here, connect it up. Right now our screen doesn't actually show anything, so let's add some stuff. First thing let's add is the checkbox that's going to be for our on-call settings. So the label is anything you want the user of the flow to actually see at runtime. I'm not going to bother with the default or with validation or help right now. I'm just going to say done, and now let's add the more complicated vote. So for the vote, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a radio button group. And the radio button group is going to have a label and a data type, and we're going to have choices that we want to add to this group. Let's create some choices. So you can see here the 3 kinds of choices that you can pick from, and they all sound kind of similar, so it's important to understand the difference. Pick list choice sets are built from an existing pick list field. So if you've got a pick list field on an object, you can use that as the set of choices. A record choice set is built by doing a query of records. So you might say, I want to make choices out of all of the assets that meet a certain condition. And then choices, plain choices, are kind of your basic ad hoc, I just want to type some stuff in and let them pick from it. So let's start with that, because that's the most straightforward. So essentially you can think of a choice resource, a basic choice resource is like an individual radio button item. It's like an individual selection you can make, or an individual item that shows up in a list box. So we're going to have to define our items. So let's say that the 3 choices that we have, there are 3 choices for winter 20. Ice Fish and Cody, Barrel Jumpin' Astro, and Rabbit Chompin' Blaze. Okay, so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to create a choice for each one of those. So let's make this one Ice Fishing Cody. Now this is just the API name. This is how the underlying choice gets referenced, but what the user actually sees is the label. And this, you've got a lot more flexibility. And then here we can say what the type of the choice is. So this is just a text choice. Now the choice value is what gets passed on to the flow when the user selects this by the label. So I'm just gonna say Cody here. So basically it's gonna look like Ice Fishing Cody, but when I manipulate it, I'm just going to treat it as the underlying value Cody. And that's just like HTML. The label can say one thing, the underlying value can be another thing. The label could be translated into a different language, but you could deal with the same word across all languages for the underlying value. So let's fix this. Let's see. It's still complaining here. I guess the hyphen is a problem. And okay, so now we've got our choice. Now nothing's changed on the screen because a choice itself doesn't have a visual representation. Choices are used inside of those screen elements, and we've lost our screen element. I forgot to save that, so it's not even visible here. Let's go and define two other choices. So what did we agree here? Let's go back and look at this, and here's our description, and let's create another choice, and we're gonna use barrel jumping Astro. Let's try and get ahead of the problems that we know. Okay, and there's our choice label. It's going to be text, and we're just going to call the underlying value, we'll just say is Astro. And then for our third choice, we're going to do Rabbit Chomp and Blaze. Let's see here. Okay, so we've defined our three choices here. So now let's go back and try adding that screen once again. All right, so let's give this vote for the winter 20 icon, and this is going to be text. And now we have our choices defined, so we can select them, and you can see they pop up right here as available resources. So let's add those as three choices, and you can see that the preview shows you what it's going to look like. All right, and let's save our work so far. Let's call this lesson 1. I think we're up to 1E. And it's a screen flow. All right, so we want to handle the most expert. What is the thing that you are most expert in? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a pick list. I'm going to use a pick list choice set. So for a pick list choice set, you basically go and find a pick list field that you want to work with. Okay, so I've created a pick list field called Area of Expertise on Contact. You can see that Area of Expertise is right here. There's 5 choices, very standard. What we want to do is we want to use that pick list to create another one of these sets, because what you saw me do was a little labor intensive. I had to painstakingly craft each one of these, and I don't want to do that if I just have a nice existing pick list already ready. Okay, so we have created our pick list field, and now back in Flow, we want to put this to use by selecting another set of radio buttons, and we'll call this "What is your area of greatest expertise, greatest Salesforce expertise." And we want a text value coming out of this. And now here, instead of those individual choices, we want to create something that basically makes use of that pick list we defined. So that is possible, and it's done with this pick list choice set. So we'll call this most expert field on contact object. And now here we're going to point Flow at the pick list field that we've created. So we will go here, and you can see that it looked at the contact, it picked which pick lists are available. Turns out there are 4 of them. Here's the one that we just created. Let's say done. So we've defined that, and now when we click on this again, we can choose it. You can see it's available as a pick list choice set. And so we've got 2 different radio button groups here, but they are created in very different ways. So now we've got our 3 fields. So let's test this out. And we can do that by clicking Run. And you can see that we've got the fields that we expected. So we've got our checkbox, we've got our set of radio buttons here that we built by defining 3 individual choices, and then we have this nice 5 radio button set which we created by pointing at an existing pick list. All right, let's take a look now at the third way that you can create a set of choices. So we've covered sort of manually defining the choices, and we've covered using a pick list field. The third one is a very powerful mechanism, and that involves making a query of Salesforce records and using the records that actually get returned as the set of choices. So to take a look at that, we're going to look at the asset records that are created here, and I've created a bunch, and you can see that that basically I've defined a bunch of assets, and I've given them a category. So some of this swag is winter swag, and some of it is summer swag, some of it's year-round, some of it's spring. So we want our users, when they're running our flow and answering these questions, we want them to select the preferred piece of swag they want to get. So we only want to see some of these results. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Flow. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to create another kind of choice. We've created individual choices, we've created a pick list choice set, and then the third kind here is a record choice set. So let's call this summer swag. And these are the assets that have the category of summer swag. Okay, so now I create my query, and this is very similar to how you do any record query. So we're going to start by specifying asset, and then the conditions for the asset are, let's see, what we want to do is we want to make sure that the category is equal to summer swag. And you can see that it's actually Flow is smart enough to give you the choices right here. And what we now do is we say, okay, when the user picks one of those three values, first of all, what are they going to see? We can say, the obvious thing to say here is that what we want to show is the name of that asset. So that means that they're going to see t-shirt, they're going to see branded sunscreen, and they're going to see beach blanket. So, you know, it might be the description is actually what you want to show. So label is what we want to show, and we'll just pick name. And then in terms of the actual value, when the choice is selected, so when I pick one of these, I can also specify what value gets passed on to the rest of the flow. Because it may not be that I want to grab this name. This might be, for example, a translated value, and I want to use, regardless of what the language is, I want to use the same core identifier, kind of like there are API names that are separate from labels. But in this case, we're going to keep it simple, and we're going to say that we're going to show the name, and we want to display the name. Okay, so we have this record choice set now, and we can use it, and I'm going to create another thing. Now, instead of radio buttons, just to mix it up a little, I'm going to use a pick list, and however, the pick list is going to pick, you specify choices exactly the same whether it's radio buttons or a drop-down list box or pick list. So here we go, and we can select Summer Swag right there. And let's call this Select Your Preferred Swag. Got our Summer Swag, and we're done. Okay, so we've got our radio button choices here, and let's test and see if we've got all of this displaying properly at runtime. And here we go. So we've got, you can see here that just the three values are showing up. Just to show you how we can vary this up, let me go in here, back to Summer Swag, and let me go down here to the label, and instead of choosing from the name field, why don't we choose from the last modified date? So if we do that, then we run, and you can see that it's showing the last modified date. Would this ever be useful? Almost certainly not. But I just wanted to demonstrate that you have the power to pick whatever field you want from the record to actually show up in your flow pick list, and that's pretty useful. Okay, so the next thing we want to do in this particular lesson is do something with this data. It's almost never the case that you collect data with a flow screen and then just ignore it and lose it. Remember, when this flow stops running, anything that hasn't been saved is going to get lost. Flow is not going to automatically save this stuff for you. It doesn't know how you want to save it. It doesn't know if you want to save it. It doesn't know whether you're doing it for real or for test. So you have to specify how you want this data saved. So let's remember what we're collecting here. 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of data each time this is run. And we have places to put this data. If we look inside a contact, you can see that we have 4 fields: vote for winter 20 icon, on-call available, area of expertise, and preferred swag. So we've got 4 places to put it. Great. Okay, at this point, let's think about our use case. We have a screen here that collects data. Let's make our use case one where our user is a Salesforce agent and they are collecting this data from the contact. Maybe they're on the phone with this contact and they're asking them this questions. So they're going to be filling in this data as they collect it on the phone, and then we want to update the actual contact with the data. So as per our previous tutorial, we need to pass in, we're gonna run this from the contact page, and we need to pass in the record ID of the contact. That's right here. And that needs to get passed into the flow, and the flow needs to create a temporary storage variable to catch that, and that needs to be called record ID. So we're going to create a text variable called record ID, and we're going to click available for input. So now it is going to be there to catch the ID of the contact. And now we can specify the update records because we know which contact we want to update. So we're going to take update records and put it up here. Update current contact, and we're going to say use the incoming record ID to update the contact with the data collected on the previous screen. Now, how do we find the record? Well, we're going to specify its conditions. We're going to go here, we're going to select contact, and we are going to specifically say that we want the contact with the ID equal to our record ID, which is right down here. So we're counting on that record ID getting passed into the flow. Otherwise, this is going to blow up. It's going to have a null value here. It's not going to find anything. It's all kind of bad. But we're going to make sure that works. So we're going to find this contact. We're going to basically, flow is going to find this contact because this record ID is getting passed in. And now we actually map the values into the fields of that contact that we want to update, because this is, after all, an update. So let's see. We have area of expertise. And so what do we want to map to the area of expertise thing? There's a lot of stuff here, and we have to be careful. We aren't using choices here. We're using screen components. So notice here that we have what is your area of greatest Salesforce expertise radio buttons. So when we created that radio button group on the screen, it became a resource that we can use downstream later in the flow. So here I can now just click on it. And it's going to take the value that is output from that radio buttons, and it's going to write it into the area of expertise. And if we go back there to that radio button group and take a look, now remember here, so we're getting the choices for this from this pick list choice set called Most Expert. So let's go take a look at that over here in the manager. So here's the pick list choice set, Most Expert field. So we're going to take the values from the original pick list field. One is going to get selected. That's going to get put in temporary storage. And it's going to get written into the contacts area of expertise text field. So it's going to, we expect that it will then show up right here in area of expertise. All right, now we've got three more things to map here, so let's go find them. We've got Vote for Winter 20 icon, and you know, we still have these choice resources, but that's not, picking one of these is not what we want to do. Those were simply used to populate this radio button group. It's the output of this radio button screen component that we care about. So we're going to select that. And then we have on-call availability. And for that we go and we look for this checkbox. Are you currently available for on-call assignments? The final selection is the swag. And you know what? I'm not seeing it here, and that's because I added it quite recently. I didn't actually show it in the recording, but I added it quite recently. And Flow, when you're in edit mode like this, it's not going to pick up those kinds of changes. So let's quickly go back and pop in again and get an updated load. I'm going to go down here, and this time it shows up. So it found it. It found it when we sort of did the equivalent of a refresh. So preferred swag is going to be this pick list right here. Okay, so to summarize what we've done here, we defined a screen and we populated it with choices from a variety of different mechanisms. The user, the agent, is going to fill this out, and then the particular contact is going to get updated. So let's run this, and what we're going to do this time is we're going to insert this flow. Because this is a screen flow, we can actually put this right onto the record page. So let's replace this add account member flow with the new flow we've created. First thing we have to do, as always, because we want to use this flow in other parts of Salesforce, we have to activate it. So let's go into it and click activate. All right, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here. So how do you get a flow to show up on a Lightning record page? Well, you go into App Builder. So let's select Edit Page. And flow is basically a component that you can add from the palette here. So we've got this flow component, and I can delete it. I can drag it back here. And what I'm going to do here is I am going to look for my Lesson 1E screen fields. And I'm going to, this is very important, I'm going to pass the record ID into this variable. App Builder wants you to clarify that right here, and you can see that it's basically saying it's going to grab the current record's ID, it's going to pass it in as the variable record ID, and as you'll remember, we have set up a flow variable to catch that. Okay, so I'm going to save this now, and let's go and take a look. And you can see here that we have the flow, and it's got all four of these elements here. So where are we? We're looking at Lauren Boyle's information, and if we go into Lauren Boyle, we can see that right now she's blank for all four of these. So we don't have anything here at all. So let's say that she is available for on-call. She likes Rabbit Chomp and Blaze. Her area of greatest expertise is Lightning Flow, and she wants the beach blanket. So click No here. And now let's take a look. And you can see that all of the information has been properly updated into the screen. I want to point out one thing. Notice here in the Vote for Winter 20 icon, it says Blaze. It doesn't say Rabbit Chompin' Blaze. And I just wanted to remind you of why that is. If we go back to the choice that we defined, and we go back to Rabbit, Chomp, and Blaze, you can see that for the value, we just typed in Blaze. So the value is what the choice passes forward if it's selected. The value is the information that's going to go forward. And so if I wanted it to say Rabbit Chomping Blaze, then I could make it that. In this case, it's kind of like a style thing. If we're just manipulating these as data, then simpler strings are easier. If this is something that's going to be displayed, then we might want to use the full value as the choice value. So that's just something to keep in mind. Whatever you define as your value is the thing that gets passed out, no matter what the label is that the person running the flow sees, no matter what the data is inside, no matter what the API name is, no matter what you put in the description, it's the value that gets passed forward. And that can be very useful. Like, for example, here we set this as text, but you could assign currency values as the values that get passed forward. Those would never be visible to the people using the flow, but they would be passed forward for use later in the flow. So we've used flow here, and when you put flow in as a screen element, it will restart unless you do something differently. And if you don't want that behavior, then you can use the process that we described in earlier tutorials and make this a button, in which case it will pop up on the screen as a dialog box and can be filled out. All right, so you've seen how we can use different kinds of screen fields and then use choices. We've demonstrated the 3 kinds of choices that are available, and we've demonstrated checkboxes. You've seen how that's all set up, and you've seen how you can then use the data that you collect to update a flow and run it all from the screen. Here are some additional resources where you can learn a lot about flow, the other tutorials, some of our official data, and the link to the unofficial flow community site.